Hi everyone, so it's Tom from the Woodland School. Not done a video in a while, so using the opportunity to do a little bit of a video, talk about some of the things that have been happening lately, and also, rather than answering sort of 400 comments or so on Facebook and things, the way things are going with the latest bit on traps, just thought I'd explain a few concepts, and then yeah, we'll get things organised quicker. I'm testing out as well a new tarp by a company called Andes. It seems really good. Three things I like about it are: one, it's relatively inexpensive. I think including postage it was less than £20. Two, it's big. It's a 3x3 metre tarp, which is great for hammocking. I've got it set up in a plough point, and I'll get some photos of that later. And three, it's orange. I do like orange, as people who know me will tell you. So what I've been doing recently is I've been looking more at tracking and trapping. So sort of the practical side of it with trapping and things like that. Again, if you are trapping, always do what you're doing within local laws. A lot of the techniques I've been showing are survival methods, so they're not designed for general trapping. They are primarily a survival method because bought-in traps are far more efficient and effective than stuff that we tend to make. But in a survival situation, you are trying to save your own life. You're trying to get yourself rescued. You're trying to prolong your time that you can hang on for till that rescue arrives, or till you can get yourself to safety. So that's the reasoning behind why we learn the techniques. Is not for general everyday trapping, but more for what we're doing in a survival scenario. So the two that I've looked at trigger wise, what I've looked at is I've looked at a figure 4 and an L7. Now these two specifically, because they tend to be the most versatile. So I'll turn the camera around and we can see. So the L7 that we've got here, okay, so we've got our 7 notch and our L notch, they mate together, and what I've got it set on here is a spring snare. So there's a little bit of tension. It goes up to where the branch that my plough point's attached to, and it's just pulled down ever so slightly. There's a little bit of tension on there. It's attached to a snare. It's nothing special. It's just a free running loop that can slide back forwards and backwards. There we go, and I'll move that out of the way, and it's set in such a way that our target species would come along, place its head through the loop, its shoulders would get caught, it would pull itself free of this little notch here. The loop would tighten, it would tighten, and it would tighten until there's tension on it, and then it would release, and it is set quite strong, so it would release that notch. Now there's not a lot of tension on here, purely because I don't want to break the branch above, but that is the premise of our L7. Now you don't have to use this for mammal species. You can also set it on fish traps. So you could set some fishing line and have the line into the water on a hook. As the fish comes along, it will pull that L7, and it will release our top piece. I would personally find a lot stronger branch with a lot more spring to it. So you want something that's a lot more like a green sapling. You know, for example, these are all made out of hazel, green hazel, lots of spring to it. You could virtually pull it double and get loads of tension on it. And then that way, when it pulls, it will pull the fish out of the water. It will create that pull as though you were pulling it on a rod or on a pole. The same with a game animal. You don't want that animal to suffer. So you want that animal in a position where it's going to be up off the ground and it's going to be killed quite quickly. these are lethal traps in that they generally do tend to kill unless you set them quite weakly, in which case you could cause the animal to suffer for quite some time. The other advantage of using the L7 on a spring is that you can actually raise game animals up out of the way. So things like rabbits, if you're not going to be checking your trap for a couple of hours, there might be a predatory species out there that may be interested in your food as well. They may find something just on the floor that's been snared and killed, and they'll eat it. If it's up above where that predator can get to it, you're going to keep that food source longer. It lasts a lot better. Now, the other method we looked at, and I'll bring it over, was the figure 4. Now, what I've not done, I've not set the figure 4 this time, purely because I want to show you, and I've got footage of the trigger activating. So this is our figure 4. It looks like a number 4. Now, what we do is we have our rest pole here, we have our bait stick, and we have our ground pole. Now, I've set this flat at the bottom so we can rest it on a flat surface. You could spike this at the bottom. There's not really a problem with that. Now this bait stick, now I've left this plain. You could flatten it and stick some bait to it, berries, things like that. Just sort of crush them up, put them on, they'll stick to it. You could make it a stick skewer, so you could have something skewered on there, be it something like a worm or an insect that would attract birds. These are generally used for deadfalls and cage traps. Now, they will catch quite a wide variety of species. There are other ways of setting cage traps off, but the figure 4, falling apart there because I've not kept hold of it, but the figure 4 is quite versatile in that you can use it for deadfalls as well. So you can place a large rock here, or a log, or something, ideally 4 or more times the weight of the target species. Again, not cause suffering to any animal that we are trapping and killing. We're not doing this for cruelty, or I hope we're not. We're doing this to secure a food supply, and that is simply, it is a survival tool. It's not a pest control method, it's not a catch and release method, unless it's maybe attached to a cage trap. But as a deadfall, this is purely a survival method. So when set to a cage trap, saying that goes back, live food lasts longer. If you can cage trap something like a bird, you can then keep hold of that bird. You don't have to kill it straight away. You can. So if you've set multiple ones of these, and you would want to be setting as many of these as possible, because you want to maximise your chances of getting a food supply. If you are setting as many of these as possible, and just 1 second, I will go and reset that peg because it's a little bit shallow and it's spun round on me. There we go. It's the only downside to wire pegs is if they spin round, they unhook from the tarp. If we're setting these, we want to set as many as possible because we are securing a food supply. We're not doing this as a we're not doing this in a sport sense. If we're doing this in the sense that we're running a trap line or something like that commercially, we want to be, or if we're homesteading, we want commercial grade traps because they are far more successful. They cause a lot less distress to the animals. They're a lot more instantaneous, and if they are a catch and release type, they're going to catch the animal, they're going to hold it, they're going to do minimal injury, so then we can either dispatch the animal if it's our target species, or if it's a non-target species, we can release it with minimal harm caused. So that was a little bit on traps. Now, as for sort of the setting of these, now I've made these slightly chunky. So the thing is, they're set up in such a way that they're not going to activate as readily as possible, but for visuals, they look better. So when you're setting these, you want to set them to the size of animal that you're targeting. You don't want to set something like a spring snare to catch a horse if you're after rabbits, because what will happen is that animal will cause itself a lot of distress before it's captured, and you'll cause it harm. Inversely, you don't want to also set them too light, so that every time somebody comes past and sneezes, all your traps go off, because you spend a lot of time resetting your traps. So the way I've set them is I've set them quite coarse, in the sense of that L7. Now, a lot of people have said you want to make them out of thinner sticks. I do, but to look at those traps when they're on thinner sticks, to see the notches properly, it's a lot more tricky than if you have them as big chunky traps. The same with the deadfall. I would make that out of a lot thinner sticks, but for the visual purposes it looks a lot better, it's a lot easier to see. So yeah, so that's just a little bit about traps and trapping. Tracking, obviously, you know, you want to be finding your target species. You don't want to be, you know, if you're trapping fox, for example, you know, you want to be able to identify those tracks. You want to be able to see the paw print and see the X on that paw print. You want to be able to see how that marks up. If you're trapping rabbit, you want to be looking for rabbit traps. You want to be looking for rabbit fur caught on objects. You want to be looking for runs. You want to be looking for areas where the rabbits have moved through, and bent grass, things like that. So you want to, and then you want to set your traps on game trails accordingly. Traps don't work if they're abnormally placed. So if you're placing a trap not on a game trail, the game's highly unlikely to go that way. Game trails are formed because a lot of animals are creatures of habit. They will go the same way until there is something to make them go another way. So yeah, and we can increase our chances by setting things like funnels, so we can place barriers of sticks up to where our trap is, so that the animal will stay right in the middle of that trap where we want it to be, so that it's not going out to the sides. So yeah, that was a little bit more about traps and tracking. I'll obviously follow up with some more stuff as we go on, but I thought I'd just do a quick video whilst I'm out here. I'll get some photograph footage of the plough point setup that I've done. It's quite a common setup, it's just I thought I'd show you this tarp because it is quite a nice tarp, if folks are interested in it, and hopefully I will see you all soon.